Well, let's talk to Ben Habib now. He is Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Ben, you're very welcome to the programme.
Good afternoon, Peter. Good to be on and good to see you again.
Very many congratulations to you and your Reform UK colleagues. I know you didn't quite make it yourself in Wellingborough. Commiserations on that, but you must be delighted that there are now 5 Reform UK MPs. What kind of impact do you think they'll make?
Well, I think it's a huge impact. I think it's an event of real political significance. We're going to see a rewriting of the way the Parliament operates, the composition of Parliament. I think we're seeing the end of the two-party system. I know that Labour looks like it has got a thumping majority, but it's a majority that's wafer thin in a lot of constituencies, and they did it on a very low vote, a smaller vote than they got in 2019. So I think we're seeing a fragmentation of politics. I think we're going to see a continued uptick in the number of seats that Reform UK has. And of course, we'll be using the time between now and 2029 to build our knowledge of the various constituencies, the 98, for example, where we came second to the Labour Party, to understand where our vote share is, how we can change our vote share, and how we can get ahead of both the Labour and Conservative parties in various constituencies. And I think we're going to be on a very strong wicket, because we're going to spend the next 5 years with capital behind us, something we haven't had before. We've done everything on a shoestring, but we've now got some significant donors, and with the success we've had, I'm sure they'll stay with us. So we'll have the capital wherewithal to do all the analysis we need and start the ground game, get local councillors elected, etc. So given how thin the Labour majority was, and assuming the Conservative Party can't get its act together, and I suspect it won't be able to get its act together, I think Reform UK will be in a very strong position for 2029.
But nonetheless, you are dwarfed by certainly the Labour Party has nearly 100 times as many MPs as you do. Can your voice really be heard, Ben?
Well, before this election, every party had an infinite number of MPs compared to us on a multiple basis. So, and I remember chatting to you, Peter, a few months ago, and you said, well, you're not going to get any MPs. Do you remember during the local election?
I'm happy that I was wrong. I'm happy.
And the naysayers, the decriers, if you like, said you won't get any seats. Now they're saying you've only got 5 seats. But, you know, all long marches start with a single step. And actually, we've taken 3 or 4 steps now. And it must be clear to people that we are established. That must be clear to people.
Ben, I was happy to be wrong, but it is nonetheless, as you will appreciate, my position to ask you tough and searching questions, which you always answer in fairness, and you're always very generous with your time and your expertise. Let me ask you something I think we probably agree with one another completely on, which is that Reform UK got 4.1 million votes and 5 seats. The Lib Dems got 3.5 million votes and 72 seats. What do you think now about PR or electoral reform?
So our manifesto promotes PR. Actually, I think, irrespective of the debate over PR, the only way that Reform UK is going to really get into Parliament in a substantial way is through first past the post. And I suspect that once we've prevailed on the first past the post, the debate for PR will diminish in significance. I can't see us failing under first past the post now. I think it's going to happen. And while it's completely iniquitous that the Liberal Democrats got 600,000 votes less than we did, but 12 times as many seats, and the Conservative Party, which got less than twice as many votes as we did, got 24 times as many seats. But what we've got to do, and we're perfectly capable now of doing it, is understanding how it is we didn't get more seats, what we need to do in those 98 seats and other seats where we came second, and, you know, make sure that we play the electoral game in accordance with the rules that first past the post lay down.
It's interesting, isn't it, in terms of this bizarre and really, genuinely very interesting story, which perhaps you'll tell us, about James McMurdock, who is now one of your MPs. I mean, it was certainly, there were senior people in your party, not you, but I was talking to other senior people who were saying, look, we're probably going to get, I mean, in the last few days, obviously, we're saying hopefully 2, maybe 4, and actually the 4 that were predicted by a senior member of your party to me were exactly the 4 that came through. And then out of absolutely nowhere, James McMurdock, who not exactly a household name and perhaps not even particularly well known to you, came through on, I mean, a paper candidate. Maybe it's maybe just explain to some people who may not know what a paper candidate is, and every party does them. It's not in any way implied as a criticism, but he was a paper candidate, wasn't he? And now he's a member of Parliament.
He was, and we had a number of paper candidates who came second behind Labour with not a
and just talk us through from a political party's perspective what a paper candidate is, because some people won't know.
So, I mean, every political party has the seats which they really wish to contest, where they think they've got the best chance, and they tend to try and field their best candidates in those seats. And no one can fill really credibly 650 good candidates or first-class candidates right across the country. And particularly when an election comes at very short notice, you have to move quickly. So you find people who you hope haven't said anything particularly stupid on social media in the past. They're ideologically aligned with you. They're perfectly sane human beings, and you put them down as paper candidates. We wouldn't have had the money for them to campaign. We wouldn't have been able to put too much leafleting around them or to give them support with canvassers, etc. And James McMurdock was one of those candidates. And he came through late in the day on Friday. I think the vote count must have happened a few times, and he won by 98 votes in Thurrock. Thurrock, actually, funny enough, when I look at it now, I wonder why we had a paper candidate there, because it was a good seat. It was a seat where, we would have stood, and obviously we did stand a very good chance. But all credit to James, and absolutely terrific that he's come through. I didn't know James until he got elected. But I will get to know James quite quickly. He's got, I think, 1,800 followers on Twitter. I suspect his Twitter followers are going to go up dramatically in the next few days.
I would say so. I will no doubt be one of them. I'd love to interview him as well. Maybe you put a word in for me. I'd love to have a chat with him, Ben. Someone on Twitter, on text, says I was unnecessarily snippy with you earlier, Ben. I'm not sure I was, but someone says I'm
not aware of it.
Okay. Stuart says, let's talk about Wales for a second, actually, because this comes up quite a lot, actually. Stuart has been in touch and says, please pass this message on to Ben Habib. Ben, please save Wales by running there with Reform in 2 years, and remember it's under PR, so Reform should get seats. At the top of the agenda should be to reverse Welsh devolution. Where do you stand on that and how Wales has been run? Because, of course, for the past 25 years, Labour has been in government in some form in Wales.
Yeah, so by memory, I think there are 60 seats in the Welsh National Assembly, and it is a PR system. And we did have representation, or I say UKIP had representation, we're the kind of modern iteration. I think we're a better form of UKIP, and, we're the kind of modern form of the Brexit Party. But UKIP did have a couple of representatives in the National Assembly there. Wales is a strong province for us. We should do well in Wales. And I think it is an area, as he rightly says, we should be concentrating on. We should be able to get representation in the National Assembly. And I also agree with him that we should campaign to abolish it. This is not a party line, this is a personal line, but I think we should be abolishing devolution, the devolved authorities of the Welsh National Assembly, the Scottish one, and indeed Stormont.
You would abolish Stormont in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, I would, because I'm a unionist, and I think that there can only be one seat of governance for the union, and I think that's Westminster. And I loathe the fact that Labour and the Tories don't stand there, that they don't really make an effort in Northern Ireland.
The Tories do stand in Northern Ireland, but they make a negligible impact. One candidate actually got 91 votes, so I mean they're not strong there at all. They haven't got a single councillor elected. Yeah.
But while I talk about Northern Ireland, you would have noticed, I'm sure, that Jim Allister, leader of the TUV, was returned for North Antrim, and I've been very close to Jim, and when the DUP turned its back on the Windsor framework and claimed that the Irish Sea border had gone, we Reform UK allied with TUV, and the TUV stood in 14 out of the 18 seats in Northern Ireland, and Jim beat Ian Paisley in North Antrim, which has been held by Ian and his father before him, I think, for 54 years.
54 years.
So,
well, it's interesting, actually, you mentioned that, and that was a real jaw-dropper in the election. But you must have been disappointed, Ben, when your party leader, Nigel Farage, actually endorsed Ian Paisley and indeed Sammy Wilson, another DUP MP, when you, I know, had worked so hard to have that match-up between the traditional unionist voice, this party that Jim Allister, the new MP, has been part of, and Reform.
Yeah, so I was in the gym when I picked up my phone, as one does, to glance at it while you're working out, and I saw the news that Nigel had endorsed Ian Paisley and Sammy Wilson, and I thought, what is going on here? Anyway, so I made a few calls, and what transpired was that Sammy and Ian had tapped him on the shoulder. He said, yes, of course. There hadn't been much thinking about what was going on. He'd just taken over as leader. I think it was literally a couple of days later or whatever. And, a few more calls later, the party put out a statement and just reaffirmed our alliance with the TUV. So that was, one of those less than brilliant moments.
Can Reform be disciplined enough, do you think? Can those kind of moments be avoided as time goes on? And also, I wonder, will Jim Allister sit with you? Will he be formally part of you? Will he take your whip as part? Could he be almost the sixth sort of Reform UK MP in Parliament?
So Jim and Nigel are meeting on Tuesday. The idea was that I think he would take our whip, but I think that's going to be the subject of a discussion between himself and Nigel. But I have to say I'm utterly delighted that Jim is going to be in the Commons. Whatever people's position on the union, Jim is a fantastic voice. He's a formidable politician. He can hold forth in a way that very few can. And if you are a unionist like I am, then he will make the case for the union and for the betterment not just of Northern Ireland, but also the betterment of Great Britain and the United Kingdom as a whole. I mean, he will really be a terrific addition to the Commons. So I'm really pleased he's got there. Terrific. For me, by the way, that was one of the highlights. The two highlights were us getting 5 MPs and Jim getting in Northern Ireland. And from here, we can build. And the TUV, too, I think, is going to get more seats in the future. Once you've got a bridgehead, you build on it. And you talked about discipline. We're a bunch of guys. Reform is a bunch of people who've come together because they're really upset about the way the country's being governed. But now that we've got seats, we've got money, we've got a structure, we're going to build and build. Discipline will come in, knowledge will come in, more money will come in. And, people need to recognize that the political landscape has changed and will not go back to the two-party, self-entitled, awful form of governance that we've experienced for the last 27 years.
OK, thank you very much indeed. That's Ben Habib there, who's Deputy Leader of Reform UK.